Tonight we begin with a development that U.S. intelligence officials had feared, defense analysts had predicted, and Middle East experts had warned was coming. A crisis that unfolded not over weeks or months, but in 72 hours. 72 hours that shattered any illusion of diplomatic progress. 72 hours that forced Washington into emergency consultations. 72 hours that brought two nations to the edge of direct military confrontation. What Tehran did this week crossed a line that the White House had hoped would hold. And when that line broke, Jerusalem did not hesitate. They responded with precision, with speed, and with unmistakable resolve. But what makes tonight's report different from anything we've covered before is this: a classified presidential order, signed by President Trump just 48 hours ago, has now been leaked to multiple intelligence outlets. The contents of that order have sent shockwaves through the Pentagon, through the State Department, and through allied capitals from London to Riyadh. And Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, according to sources speaking with us tonight, is now preparing what one Israeli defense official called a devastating strike, one that could reshape the entire strategic balance of the Middle East. This is breaking now, and everything you thought you knew about the Iran situation is about to change. For several months now, there had been signals, not official press releases, not formal diplomatic communications, just signals, that Tehran was preparing something unprecedented. Iran has been provocative, yes, but they have been calculated in their provocations. Their moves have followed a certain rhythm, a pattern, almost a choreography. But what set off alarm bells in Washington and Tel Aviv this week was that the rhythm went silent. Intelligence analysts who monitor Iranian military activity know the indicators: the movement of ballistic missile components between hardened facilities, the activation of air defense networks around nuclear sites, the sudden recall of IRGC commanders from foreign deployments, the abrupt cessation of encrypted communications that had been monitored for years. All of that went quiet. And whenever Tehran goes quiet, it means something is about to get loud. American satellites detected unusual activity at the Natanz enrichment facility. British intelligence flagged increased traffic at the Fordow underground complex. Israeli Mossad assets reported that senior Revolutionary Guard commanders had canceled all public appearances. Something was happening inside Iran that the regime did not want anyone to see. And that's exactly what made Washington nervous. Because in the intelligence world, the absence of information is itself information. And right now, the absence was deafening. President Trump, according to sources familiar with White House deliberations, demanded answers. He wanted to know what Iran was doing, why they were doing it, and what it meant for American interests in the region. The answers he received, according to those same sources, were not reassuring. Early Tuesday morning, U.S. Central Command detected what they described as anomalous strategic movements, including the repositioning of medium-range ballistic missiles that had not been moved in over 18 months. These are the kinds of assets that Iran only deploys when they are signaling something very specific: deterrence, escalation, or preparation for offensive action. Pentagon officials didn't know which category this fell into, or whether it fell into all three at once. But what they did know was that Iran was changing its military posture. And when a regional power shifts posture without explanation, even by small degrees, the National Security Council pays attention. Within hours, satellite imagery confirmed what analysts had feared. Iran had begun loading conventional warheads on its Shahab, 3 missiles, weapons capable of reaching Israel, Saudi Arabia, and American bases throughout the Gulf. This wasn't a drill. This wasn't an exercise. This was preparation, and it was happening faster than anyone had anticipated. The intelligence was immediately flagged to President Trump, who was at Mar-a-Lago when the initial reports came in. Within 90 minutes, he was on a secure call with Defense Secretary and the chairman of the Joint Chiefs. What was said on that call remains classified, but what happened next has now been leaked. The classified order issued by President Trump Wednesday night was not normal. It was not routine. It was not symbolic. It was urgent. Official after official, briefing after briefing, described Trump's directive as immediate, comprehensive, and perhaps most importantly, unprecedented in its scope, granting military commanders authorities that had been withheld since the height of tensions in 2020. According to sources who have seen portions of the order, Trump authorized what is being called Operation Persian Shield, a multi-phase contingency plan that would allow U.S. forces to conduct preemptive strikes on Iranian military assets if intelligence indicated an imminent attack on American personnel or allied nations. But deterrence only works if the target hesitates. Iran did not. In fact, their response Wednesday was among the most provocative we've seen in years. Here's what we know. Within 6 hours of Trump's order being transmitted to CENTCOM, Iranian fast attack boats began aggressive maneuvers in the Strait of Hormuz. These weren't the standard harassment operations we've seen before. These were coordinated assault formations, patterns that Iran only uses when they are preparing to interdict commercial shipping or challenge American naval vessels. And that's when Netanyahu made his move. Tonight, Israeli Defense Forces confirmed that the IF launched precision strikes on Iranian proxy positions in Syria, including a weapons depot outside Damascus that had recently been reinforced for what analysts believe was a major arms transfer to Hezbollah. Israel struck before Iran could complete the transfer. They hit the depot. They hit the convoy routes leading to the Lebanese border. They hit communications nodes that were likely preparing to coordinate the shipment. In other words, Israel targeted the logistics chain, not just the weapons themselves, but the infrastructure that would have made them operational. The command and control network, the transportation corridors, the human assets on the ground. This is what made the Pentagon's warning so urgent. Iran's military repositioning wasn't just symbolic, it was actionable. It represented the kind of escalation that could trigger a regional war if left unchecked. And Israel, understanding that fully, responded with force. Not recklessly, not impulsively, but strategically. They didn't strike Iranian territory directly. They didn't target IRGC commanders personally. They hit the supply lines. They hit the capability. They degraded Iran's ability to project power through its proxies while avoiding the kind of direct confrontation that would force Tehran into an irreversible escalation. This is surgical deterrence at its most sophisticated. And it sent a message that both Washington and Tehran heard clearly. And here's where the story becomes even more alarming. Intelligence analysts now believe that Iran's latest military movements were designed to test the resolve of the Trump administration after months of focus on other priorities. Tehran wanted to see whether Washington would issue warnings without follow-through. They wanted to probe for weakness. They wanted to see if the American deterrent was hollow. But instead, the opposite happened. The White House didn't issue a vague statement. They didn't call for restraint and dialogue. They issued a classified military order that was so comprehensive, so immediate, that even Iran's supreme leader noticed. You don't get Ayatollah Khamenei's attention easily. But this week, Trump did. Defense officials speaking with intelligence reporters under strict anonymity described Iran's posture shift as coercive diplomacy, a way to extract concessions without actually fighting. But Israel proved today that they remain both capable and willing. Their strikes were not only precise, they were timed so perfectly that Iranian air defenses had less than 4 minutes of warning. That timing matters because it shows intelligence penetration at the highest levels. It shows that Israel is not merely reacting to Iranian moves. They are anticipating them. They are inside Tehran's decision cycle. And that is the most dangerous place for any adversary to find themselves. As reports continued coming in throughout the evening, we learned more about the scale of Israel's response. The Israeli Air Force carried out over 40 sorties in a 6-hour window, forcing Syrian air defenses into continuous operation until they were effectively depleted. Israeli intelligence targeted Iranian financial transfers that had been flagged in the last 72 hours. Mossad operatives working inside Syria reportedly disrupted communication relays used by the IRGC to coordinate with Hezbollah field commanders. This wasn't just a military strike. This wasn't just a message. This was systematic degradation. This was capability denial. And capability denial is the one thing Iran has struggled to counter since the assassination of Qasem Soleimani. For every advance they have made in their proxy network, Israel has countered with something that complicates their operational planning. For every missile they have transferred, Israel has found a way to neutralize it before it can be used. And for every commander they have positioned in Syria, Israel has demonstrated the ability to locate and eliminate them. This is the shadow war that rarely makes headlines. But tonight, it just became very public. Remember, Iran thought the Trump administration was distracted. They thought American attention was focused elsewhere, on domestic politics, on economic concerns, on everything except the Middle East. They thought they had a window of opportunity to advance their regional agenda, while Washington looked the other way. But tonight, the exact opposite is happening. The United States has repositioned carrier strike groups to the eastern Mediterranean. American F-35s have been deployed to bases in the Gulf, and a classified presidential order has authorized military commanders to take preemptive action without waiting for explicit White House approval. This is not de-escalation. This is preparation. And Iran, for all their rhetoric about martyrdom and resistance, understands exactly what that preparation means. What makes this moment so dangerous and so unpredictable is that Iran's latest escalation happened at a time when Supreme Leader Khamenei is under unprecedented domestic pressure. Hardliners within the IRGC want confrontation. They believe America will never actually strike. Pragmatists in the foreign ministry want negotiation. They see sanctions destroying the economy. Reformists want engagement. They fear the regime cannot survive another war. And the population wants relief. They are tired of isolation, poverty, and repression. Khamenei is balancing these demands while his health reportedly deteriorates and succession debates intensify behind closed doors. And when leaders in that position make sudden military moves, they're not doing it from strength. They're doing it from pressure. They're doing it from vulnerability. They're trying to unify domestic factions by creating an external crisis. And that makes them dangerous, because leaders who feel cornered sometimes make decisions that rational actors would never consider. The Pentagon's warning, now being distributed to allied capitals, was designed to signal that the United States is not willing to allow Iranian aggression to go unanswered. Defense officials said plainly that Iran's military repositioning was inconsistent with any legitimate defensive purpose. That is diplomatic language for, "We know what you're planning, and we're ready to stop it." You don't usually hear that tone from the Pentagon unless something serious is at stake. The State Department, typically cautious in its statements about Iran, issued its own warning tonight, calling on Tehran to immediately reverse course and warning of severe consequences for any attack on American personnel or allied nations. These are not empty words. These are statements backed by carrier strike groups, 4 deployed aircraft, and a classified presidential order that has already authorized the use of force. Meanwhile, Prime Minister Netanyahu addressed the Israeli Knesset in a brief, direct speech tonight. He said, "Israel will not wait for threats to become attacks. We will act first, and we will act decisively." He said, "Our enemies should understand that the cost of aggression will be paid in full, not by our citizens, but by those who threaten them." And he said, "Tonight, I want to be clear. We have capabilities that have not been revealed. We have plans that have not been announced, and we have the will to use them." These are not rhetorical flourishes. These are statements from a leader who understands just how high the stakes have become. Netanyahu has been here before, facing down Iranian threats, managing American relationships, preparing his military for operations that could reshape the region. But sources close to the prime minister say this moment feels different. It feels like a turning point. Here's what makes the situation even more concerning. Iran's military repositioning wasn't isolated. Along with the missile movements at Natanz and Fordow, Hezbollah increased its alert status along the Lebanese-Israeli border, moving anti-tank units into forward positions. Houthi forces in Yemen launched a new wave of drone attacks targeting Saudi infrastructure. Iranian-backed militias in Iraq increased rocket attacks targeting American bases, 3 attacks in the last 48 hours alone. All of this happened within the same 72-hour window. When Iran moves multiple pieces at once, it means something larger is underway. This isn't random provocation. This is coordinated pressure. And coordinated pressure requires a coordinated response, which is exactly what Trump's classified order was designed to provide. Defense analysts are now considering several possibilities. One is that Iran is preparing a major strike on Israeli or American assets, using the current tensions as cover for an operation that has been planned for months. Another is that Iran is attempting to provoke a limited conflict that would allow them to claim victimhood while rallying domestic support for the regime. A third possibility, the one worrying officials the most, is that Iran is attempting to establish new facts on the ground before any potential change in American policy. They want to advance their nuclear program strengthen their proxy networks, and solidify their regional position while they believe they have a window of opportunity. But today, Israel took that card off the table. They didn't wait for diplomatic channels. They didn't defer to international institutions. They didn't hope the problem would resolve itself. They struck, and in striking, they sent a message that Iran cannot afford to ignore. What we're watching now is a test of deterrence itself. Iran wants to see how far they can push before triggering a response they cannot absorb. Israel wants to show that the cost of aggression will always exceed any potential benefit. The United States wants to prevent a regional war that could destabilize the entire Middle East. And the Gulf states want to prevent becoming the battlefield where this conflict is ultimately fought. Every actor has different interests. Every actor has different red lines. And right now, all of those red lines are converging in ways that make the coming weeks extraordinarily dangerous. Tonight, we've heard from intelligence officials who are now monitoring Iranian command and control networks around the clock. They say activity levels remain elevated, higher than any point since the Soleimani assassination. They say Iranian naval forces have not stood down, despite American warnings. And they say Tehran's decision to continue its aggressive posture is likely part of a broader strategy intended to test the limits of American and Israeli resolve. But Israel is not backing down. In fact, Israel is doubling down. Their response today, swift, precise, and devastating, sent a message to Tehran that miscalculation will be punished immediately. And it sent a message to Washington that Israel remains the indispensable ally in confronting Iranian aggression. As the night goes on, we expect more details to emerge about what exactly Iran hoped to achieve with this week's escalation. But what we do know is that Trump's classified order was timely. It provided military commanders with the authorities they needed. It signaled American resolve to both allies and adversaries. And it created the conditions for Israel to act without fear of American hesitation. What happens next will depend on what Iran does in the next 48 to 72 hours. If they de-escalate, this moment will be remembered as a successful demonstration of deterrence. If they escalate further, Israel and the United States have already shown they are prepared to respond with overwhelming force. They have shown they have the intelligence. They have shown they have the capability. They have shown they are ready to respond. And tonight, for the first time in years, Tehran appears to be uncertain. The Supreme Leader's office is quiet, too quiet. And when Iran is quiet after a confrontation like this, it means they are calculating. It means they are reassessing. It means they are choosing their next move carefully. Because tonight, Iran learned something they should have known all along. America under Trump will not be tested without consequence. Israel under Netanyahu will not be threatened without response. And the axis of resistance they have spent decades building can be degraded in hours when the decision is made to act. This story is far from over. But tonight, one thing is clear. The classified order has been issued. The strikes have been launched. And the next phase of this crisis will determine whether the Middle East descends into war or steps back from the brink. And we will be here, watching every detail as the next phase unfolds. This is Breaking Now. Stay with us.